Okay, good evening, everybody. Today we have a main talk about building connections, communication, and complex thinking for regenerative future. It is represented or presented by Professor Dr. Christine Boyko-Head from Canada. In the name of the ICIE, I would like to welcome my dear friend and colleague, Christine Boyko-Head from Canada. Beyond our friendship, I am truly honored to introduce her as one of the most distinguished minds working in our field today. For decades, the ICIE has focused on gifted education, excellence in education, creativity, and innovation. Professor Dr. Christine Boyko-Head has over 25 years of experience in learning, teaching, publishing, facilitating, researching, and curriculum development. She is dedicated to arts, integrated learning, creativity, futures, and anti-oppressive pedagogy. She is a full-time communications professor at Mohawk College, Canada. Before settling into a stationary institution, she taught internationally for Lesley University, Creative Education Foundation, and the International Center for Innovation in Education. Her research project, Mind the Gap, which is published in 2020, was published by the ICIE, and she has done numerous keynote presentations and workshops for educators, healthcare providers, and business leaders. Her goal is to minimize the familiar and maximize the diverse through interdisciplinary explorations that challenge conventional educational practices. Her current research brings together creativity, art-based research, possibilities studies, semiotics, and the future studies to explore metaphors and myths of women and their inner development through radical, playful, co-creative feminist facilitation. Dr. Christine Boyko-Head is going to present this lecture, and I already sent you the abstract for this talk. But if you did not receive it, please write me your name and email address in the chat room, and I will send you the abstract and the link to access the recorded lecture in YouTube. This is the abstract, which I already sent in both languages, English and Arabic. Our speaker is uniquely equipped to guide us through this complex landscape. Welcome today to the ICIE International Talks. Christine, you are more than welcome. The stage now is yours. I will stop sharing and you will share your slides.
Okay, so I'll get started first without the slides and then I'll share. Thank you so much, Tazir, for that very warm welcome. Thank you everyone for coming. Good afternoon. I'm sure you've had a busy Monday, and I really do appreciate you coming to this talk and Tazir for arranging this. I'm really excited to do this. So marhaba, everyone. I hope I pronounced that right. I'm better with the spelling. Good, I'm getting a thumbs up. So what I want to do first off is just get us started. I'm going to ask people if you can get some paper and maybe a marker or a pen. If you're sitting at your desk, you might have those things. And we're going to just do a very quick activity first. And before we do that, maybe we can put in the chat, where you're coming from, what country you're from, and what you hope to get from this session. Then I'll see, hopefully I am going to hit the things that you're looking for. And of course, I can always change things at the end and try and address some of your needs. But I think one of the things that I hope to get during this session and hope to give you is exactly what the title is about. This idea of building connection. So I hope to build connection with you to enhance our communication and our complex thinking so that we can have those preferred futures that we want. So if you have that piece of paper and marker, just kind of set it aside because I'm going to actually start us off by inviting you to do a grounding activity. So if you just want to settle in your seat, get comfortable, maybe you can close your eyes if you like, but you don't have to. And I'm going to ask you to just do some relaxing breathing and breathing in through your nose and then out through your mouth so that you actually hear the air leaving. And then back in through the nose and out through your mouth and feel that air reaching all the parts of your body as you breathe in and out. And just settle in comfortably into your seat, your feet on the floor, your arms relaxed. And get a rhythm to your breathing, something that's comfortable for you. In and out, in and out. And I'm going to ask you while you're doing this breathing to think about a time in your learning journey when you felt connected, when you felt really understood, you felt like you belonged. And breathe in and out. When did you really feel cared about in your learning journey? And I want you to accept that image, hold it, and think about where it was. Where did this take place? This sense of connection, being understood and cared about. Where were you? Who was there? And how did it make you feel? So hold that image in your mind. And now I invite you to get your paper and your marker. And I'd like you to draw, just using figures and shapes and lines, something from that image. You don't have to be Rembrandt or Michelangelo. You could be more of a Picasso. But I'm going to give you about 15 seconds to quickly draw something, a symbol, a representation of that moment when you felt really understood when you were in your learning journey. So take about 15 seconds to draw, and then we're going to share it maybe by holding it up to the camera so maybe people can come on using their videos just to hold their images. So quickly draw what you envisioned, what you remembered about a time when you felt understood. And if your mind actually went to a time when you weren't understood, hold that as well, because that teaches something for us, as well as the positive. But hopefully we all have a positive moment of belonging. I'll give you about another 10 seconds to draw your image. I'm not giving you a lot of time, so of course these drawings are not going to be perfect. We don't want them to be. They don't have to represent anything to anyone but you. So maybe now if you could come on to video, if you're not already, and just hold up your image, if you can, to the camera. Anybody have an image other than me? Okay. So I'm going to thank you for doing that. Maybe you didn't want to share. You were a bit shy of your work, but it is just for you. But did want to start with this activity where we think about when we felt connected in school. And I hope that all of us have at least one moment that we can think about that. Think about that teacher that made us feel special, or maybe it was the class that we had that made us feel special, because that's what we're going to be talking about today. So I'm going to share my screen and we'll get started. It may just take me a moment to get it set up. And you should be seeing just the agenda screen. Is that right, Tazir? You can, yes? Okay, I saw you nodding. So here's our agenda today. So you already know the title of this talk, Building Connections, Communication, and Complex Thinking for Regenerative Futures. And what I want to do is start by identifying a paradox within education and society. And we are really hyper connected to the world through technology. Even the fact that we can have this meeting today through Zoom and we're in different parts of the world is a testament to technology and how connected we can be. Yet we know from different statistics that our physical and emotional alienation is increasing. And when it comes to education, we have learners feeling disconnected, disenfranchised, isolated, and lost from themselves, from each other, from us, and from a greater sense of purpose in life as well. And so I'm going to talk about the inner and outer barriers to building connection in our classrooms. But then I want to take it further. I want to look at the ways we can build inner and outer connection. And I'm going to share two frameworks that I've been using in my classrooms. And one I've been using for many, many years, and it just keeps getting richer and richer. That's the 3D briefing model. And the other one is a new framework that I've just discovered as of probably March of this year. And I'm using it in my classrooms this fall, and it's really making a difference as well. So I want to go from, our current state of disengagement to how do we build engagement? And then I'm going to close with asking you to share your inner and outer actions. What do you do in your classroom, or what would you like to try in your classrooms to build community? So that's the agenda for our time together this morning. So let me explain my role. Tazir read that biography, and it always seems so strange to me to hear that. It sounds so formal, but I've been involved in education for a long, long time. And I consider myself a continuous learner. I'm always taking classes. I'm always going to webinars, much like you coming to this. So I think we're alike in that way, that we just like to learn. And my role in education is to help all learners discover and in some cases recover their voice so that they can effectively express their ideas, their concerns, their hopes, and futures in a way that contributes to our common humanity. Basically, that's a fancy way to say I teach communications at the college in Canada. And I'm not going to go into what else I've done because Tazir had explained that. But the one thing that really did make a difference in my life was when there were no jobs here in Canada. And I got a job with Lesley University in Cambridge, Massachusetts, although I always lived in Canada. They flew me to their different campuses across the USA and in Israel. And what I was teaching there was the integration of the arts across the curriculum. And this is going to come back later in this presentation because it was so pivotal for me and my career to see that what I loved, which was the arts, could be integrated into these other subject areas in a way that was meaningful and actually gave it a place in the curriculum. Because probably, as you know, usually the arts, whenever we get into a situation of austerity, the arts will be one of the first classes to get cut. And this was a way to build it into our mandatory curriculum in a way that was meaningful. And it really was life-changing for me. So one of the things also with my role, every September in Canada, I get new students. Every September, I have to build community with these students. And that is part of my job as a caring educator. I've made the conscious decision to build community, not just walk in the room and teach them, but I want to get to know them. But what isn't part of my job is to build their self-confidence, their self-image, their self-esteem. And what isn't part of my job is to build their basic communication, critical thinking, and collaboration skills. By the time I get them, they're 18 years old and higher. They're 18, 19, 20, 28, 32, 35. They should have these attributes and skills, and I should be building on top of that foundational level. But they don't. So we're not only their teacher, we become their personal counselor, their life coach, their therapist, and we are in fact building key social emotional qualities, attributes, and behaviors that make a learning community and sense of belonging possible. So we're actually starting below ground zero because they come to me without these things. And that has led me to present this topic to you today because this is something that I've seen over the years, and it's not getting any better. It's a recurring issue that because of our hyper-connected technological world, it's in fact getting worse. And I'm not the only one saying this. But we can make it better. Building connection, communication, and complex critical thinking skills will enable our learners to regenerate positive futures for themselves and society. But we have to work at this. We can't take it for granted. So my students tell me that they don't watch the news because it's too depressing. And while they're not wrong, they are seeing current events only through a binary lens of opposites, something our society has been based on, for millennium. There's good news versus bad news. There's black versus white. There's male versus female. There's hope versus depression. And the UN Interdevelopment Goal Team states that without intercultural, intergeographical, and intergenerational connectedness, global regeneration and transformation will be difficult, if not impossible. They also state that the complexity of the world makes binary thinking no longer acceptable because it's too simplistic. It's too simplistic a view of life and situations, and they advocate for the recognition of polarities and that life can be both and rather than an either or. And this issue of the either or, pick this or that, is something that my recent research into the metaphors of women really illustrated. Women found it really difficult to pick this or that. Their lives are more complex than that, and they wanted to do a both and. So even that research demonstrates what the UN IDG team is talking about, this idea of complexity. And we can't live in a binary world for all the situations that we're facing. So now what I've discovered about myself and my teaching through self-reflection, and I'm always self-reflecting on what I've done wrong in the teaching situation and what has gone well, is I choose to live in the world of improv. Those of you that maybe theater people out there know that improv is about yes and. It's a yes and universe. Yes, the news is depressing, and it holds the possibility of teaching empathy. Yes, the world is cruel, and it holds the opportunity for me to show kindness. Yes, there is struggle, and there is also resilience. So we have a crisis in our classrooms and our schools regarding belonging and connection, and we have the potential to fix it. And that is the overarching goal of this talk, to see the yes and possibilities out there rather than the no but ideas. So when it comes to belonging and when it comes to academic achievement, research has long told us that a sense of connection and belonging in schools leads to empowered and effective educational systems. And all of this is based on the fact that students that feel they belong are also engaged. They are motivated. They are collaborating in the classroom. And they're doing this while also building self-awareness and awareness of others and empathy towards others. And classrooms where they feel they belong are connected and learners are academically thriving. This thriving comes from a sense of autonomy over their learning. The learning is relevant to learners' futures and their careers. And the learners feel they have a capacity to build competencies and skills even when things are challenging. So these three things, again, coming from research about the curriculum being relevant to their needs, the students feeling a sense of autonomy and self-efficacy about their actions in their own learning journey, and the fact that they can learn these competencies are really important elements coming from this sense of belonging in the classroom. Students have a growth mindset, which is coming from Carol Dweck, which you may be familiar with her work. And this belief comes from the fact that they feel people care about them. And due to this caring, they put effort into their schooling because, as Terrell Strayhorn says, they feel they belong, which really means they feel that they are needed in the learning process as well. They have a role to play and they have something to contribute to the group. So it's not just them participating in extracurricular activities, it's them having a sense that they are needed in this process. And I'm just going to show the book that Terrell Strayhorn, one of the books he's written called College Students' Sense of Belonging. And this, of course, is based on a lot of years of research into belonging. But Terrell was one of the speakers at an event that Tazir had organized, the ICIE conference in Romania. And his talk is was very significant to what's happening today in classrooms. So I want to give credit to him in articulating this idea of reciprocity in the classroom, that students have to feel not only that somebody cares for them, but that they are caring back, and there is this needing that it's going back and forth in the classroom. According to Tucker, another researcher, educational researcher, the contemporary classroom should create a learning community in which all members of the class are valued participants who actively contribute to the collective intelligence in the room. So communication, collaboration, creative critical thinking, all things that are important to me in my classroom and the communications course I teach, these things play important roles in generating a healthy sense of community. Peer interaction becomes a major contributor to producing or inhibiting a sense of belonging. And Strayhorn again recommends that policymakers, staff, and faculty seek ways to encourage a school culture that satisfies what Maslow has identified as a basic human need, this idea of belonging. He says belonging means learners need a feeling, a sense, a belief that one matters to others around them and that someone else cares about them. And I don't know if Tazir, you recognize your daughter in that one picture from an ICIE presentation years ago, uh, quite a few years ago. So I wanted to add that just to give you a little smile. Unfortunately, let's get back to the topic. Many learners don't feel don't feel this sense of belonging. And the Mind the Gap book, which was also a project that I did in Canada, so I'll kind of show that book. The Mind the Gap book and other projects that I've been involved with attest to the fact that a lot of students don't have this sense of belonging in their classroom. They struggle with critical thinking and thoughtful communication and effective collaboration. These struggles become deficiencies, which then become barriers, which become habits in poor communication and critical thinking. Worse yet, these deficiencies and habits are internalized and seriously impact the social, emotional well-being of learners and often affect their academic achievement and thriving. So it's a domino effect of issues. Meaningful interaction can be difficult to achieve because the disconnections we are battling run deep. And it's part of a sticky system of issues, like a tangled ball of yarn. And yet, one of the last acts I did with my 92-year-old mother was completely meaningless, and it was so meaningful. And it was to untangle a ball of yarn. And so I want to kind of give a shout out to her because I am who I am because of my mother. And this idea of not backing away from struggles and challenges, but untangling the ball of yarn. So while there are many threads that we can pull with this tangled mess that we have, I'm going to briefly summarize just a few of those that I've encountered in my research with students and my everyday interactions with them. I'm not always doing research formally, but I am in the classroom. And so my mind is always thinking at that level of how can I do this better? And some of those issues are discussed in the Mind the Gap book, which ICIE published, and it has all sorts of photos from our classrooms and activities that do learning differently. So while I'm still seeing these issues of disenfranchisement, especially every September, I am battling to create connection in my classrooms. And you will quickly see that they are interconnected, these issues that I'm going to talk about, and that they, of course, contain sub-issues that we could discuss as well, but we only have so much time here. Maybe at the next ICIE conference, we can go deeper into some of them. But I'm going to deal with them one at a time. And the major one that I want to talk about is a deficit mindset. If you know the work of Carol Dweck, she talks about growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. So the idea of a deficit mindset falls into that fixed mindset category, where it's a mode of thinking marked by negative self-talk and feelings of inadequacy, low self-esteem, low confidence. And this, of course, is there's more to that definition, but I want to draw your attention to the word cloud here on the page, because this illustrates a survey that I did with my students in 2016 about learner attitudes and perceptions before they started my communications class. And it clearly shows how they suffered more than external disengagement. This disengagement was coming from inside. So a sense of connection can be very difficult to achieve when learners suffer from inner negativity that then manifests in their classroom behaviors of not wanting to connect because they feel they have no voice. No one listens to them anyways. They're anxious, they're suspicious, they're overwhelmed. So I was actually doing some research last week in preparation for this presentation, and I was totally shocked to discover that 70% of post-secondary institutions in Canada do not track suicides or attempts at suicide among their students. And a faculty from the University of Ottawa stated that if we're not paying attention to what's going on in terms of the mental health and the wellness of our students, then we're not in a position to be able to try to improve that mental health. So the fact that 70% are not tracking is a story that is not good. Because how can we help them if we don't have the numbers? So another thing that I want to talk about that links to this is that when we think about education, if you think about your own educational journey and what that looked like, you're probably going to recall the banking style of education. You know, when your teacher put information into you. McKinney, another educational researcher, describes it as students being asked to regurgitate someone else's ideas through rigidly structured essays and reports. And our Mind the Gap project wanted to turn that upside down. We didn't want students regurgitating what we gave them. We wanted them to think for themselves. But again, you have this word cloud that is clouding their minds. So you have to get past that. So, and the irony in all of this is that while the banking system of education is very passive and most learners hate it, they've actually internalized it. And this has closed them off to learning that uses unfamiliar, maybe innovative strategies. And we see that learning that is active, that is participatory, that maybe uses art-based strategies, that is co-creative, is different than the traditional authoritative lecture, and students suspect it. They don't trust it. They're suspicious of it. They don't even know what it is, and they think this can't be learning because learning can't be fun. Likewise, classrooms can't be places of caring and compassion, according to them. They haven't really seen that before. So, what is this new classroom that they're seeing? And, you know, I have many stories of people observing my classrooms and other classrooms that are very active and innovative in this way. And they question whether it's even for credit because it looks like it's too much fun. Where did we ever say education couldn't be fun or learning couldn't be fun? And just to give you another idea of this learner expectations, a colleague of mine just the other week told me that one of her students said she was the only professor in his 7 courses that cared to get to know their names. Now, she has 240 students. I have 160 students, yet we try to put a name to a face. And this attempt is noticed by students because sadly, it's unfamiliar to them. This isn't happening in some of their other classrooms. Again, in Mind the Gap, the book is full of activities that definitely help with name learning. But even an attempt that fails, you know, I've actually called on students and called them the wrong name. That's better than no attempt at all. And so my point here is that learners have a deficit mindset. So they have this negative talk that they don't have anything good to say. They don't know how to express themselves. And then they've been conditioned to accept poor pedagogy so that when they see something different, innovative, creative elsewhere, it's unfamiliar to them. And as a result, they become resistant learners in our creative classrooms until we build their trust. So again, we have to start from below ground zero to get them to feel like they belong. Now, if we take the regurgitation of information by learners and add Hammond's observations that structural inequalities, such as the prioritizing of linguistic and logical thinking in our school systems, negatively influence the academic mindset of many of our culturally and linguistically diverse students, we have highlighted learner expectations that are created by systemic oppression within our system. This oppression is further intensified by academia's traditional privileging of dominant narratives, white and usually male, and structures, linear, progressive, masculine, the hero's journey, which again, my research into women's metaphors and myths is challenging and saying that a lot of women do not see themselves represented in the very linear, singular hero's journey. Their journeys are multiple and going in all different directions. And many men have the same journeys, multiple as well. And what these dominant narratives do is it alienates other ways of knowing and experiencing the world. So if we talk about even differentiation in the curriculum as outlined by Carol Dweck, sorry, not Carol Dweck, Carol Tomlinson, they both have Carol as their first name. It's impossible. Differentiation can be impossible because authentically finding out about our students as people is key to differentiation. And how can we do that within a hegemonic colonial system that keeps students in their seats, quiet, and they also then feel that they have nothing to say and that we don't care? So where only, certain voices are being permitted, we have a further alienation. So I hope you're beginning to actually see that my linear slides in no way mirror the complexity of developing an authentic sense of belonging among learners. So if learners perceive that no one listens to them, why should they try to communicate and engage with us? How do they even begin to communicate with me? So, in fact, we're in a vicious circle requiring educators, you and I, to solve inner problems, the students' inner perceptions, before we can even tackle outer issues of curriculum differentiation or individualism, skill development, and academic success. And so the cognitively rich will only get academically richer, while the cognitively poor will get academically poorer, as small differences in learning abilities are allowed to grow into larger gaps. And we have the social emotional deficiencies that students feel about themselves that complicates this. Now, another thing that I want to address here, I'm talking a lot about the problems, and I don't want to depress you. I promise I'm going to come back with how we're going to battle this. It's challenging to deal with any type of oppression when for decades we have devalued the essential skills necessary for inner and outer freedom. And this slide is one I show my students and tell them this is where we're going in this class. I am not only going to teach communication, critical thinking, and collaboration, I'm adding adjectives to those skills because communication alone is no longer enough. We can look at the state our world is in right now. Communication is not enough. We need empathetic communication. We need ethical critical thinking and ethical creative thinking by looking at all the different perspectives that these solutions are going to impact. And we need equitable, fair collaboration. So the skills themselves need these adjectives. And really, we have undervalued communication, critical thinking, and collaboration for many, many years. Ironically, it was during COVID-19 that all of a sudden these skills became important. And now they appear on every employment list, whether it's the World Economic Forum, OECD, McKinsey, the UN list. But creativity, for instance, in some lists is the number one skill employers are looking for. And critical thinking and communication was always on the list, but lower down. Now these things have moved up because they actually mobilize personal agency, authentic voice, and empathetic actions in an interconnected world. In other words, these soft skills, which I prefer to call transferable skills, are the best way to prepare learners for jobs and futures in uncertain times. And these organizations are now finding that as the result of what happened during COVID. So, to manage and thrive in an ambiguous future, learners need to feel a sense of agency over these challenges and replace those deficits with surpluses, to replace despair with hope. And many of my students tell me they feel despair. And one of the courses I teach is a futures thinking course. And I realized I have to, at the beginning of the course, say we are not going to imagine dystopian futures. We are going to deliberately look for hope. And I had to say that because students were gravitating to the negative, the dystopian view, the sad view. And so I made a conscious decision to deliberately tell them we are not going there because that was their default mode. And to do these things, we need to stress the value of authentic communication and creative critical thinking and equitable collaboration. So we have to go back to these soft skills and really emphasize them. But here's the next problem. In my case, my students get one class, one course, I should say, my course on transferable skills in their entire program of study, which could be 2 or 3 years of courses. So, what can I do in one class when, as I said, I'm starting not at their basic level, what I expect them to have, I'm starting below that because I have to build up their self-confidence, something that is not part of my curriculum to do. But when they internalize this deficit mindset and they don't feel a part of the learning community, then their insecurities and their feelings of inadequacy and fear of failure deepen. So, to counter this, we need time to build connection, to establish trust that this fun, unfamiliar format of learning is actually, something that works. And instead, we're asked to squeeze everything we can into our courses because there isn't room anywhere else. And now we're seeing that these soft skills, which are important for students to deal creatively and critically with their reality, needs to fit in somewhere as well. And where are we going to put it? Our curriculum is already overburdened and overextended. So let me just recap before we switch to the positive, I promise. Overall, due to these topics and more, the system has not made room for work to be done on the social, emotional health of our learners. So we can shift, deficit mindsets. How do we do that? How do we enable learners to create an important sense of self, belonging, and connection when the barriers to belonging and connection go across the individual, the social, the cultural, and global domains? Learners are feeling unseen. At the social level, they lack trust and empathy towards each other. At the cultural and global levels, now we're all suffering because the system is inadequate and not allowing for diversity and equity. and inclusion. And there is this then global sense of powerlessness because students feel overwhelmed to do anything about these major issues out there. So, this lack of attention causes and perpetuates the deficit mindset in the first place. And so, if this is the current situation, an inner and outer crisis in our students, and in a sense of belonging and connection in our classrooms, how might we shift from this crisis to our preferred futures, our more positive futures? And again, the word cloud coming from my students, and I'm hearing it still. The drawing was done by a student. Excuse me. The drawing was done by a student as well at how she felt at the beginning of a semester. And then how do we get to this ideal situation? This word, or these two word clouds, came from students at the end of a semester. So how do we get from the last image to this idea of students feeling strong, feeling confident, secure, self-assured, engaged? They're now risk takers and engaging in the chaos of my classrooms. They're positive about life. How might we prepare learners for their futures and make them believe they have the inner capacity to connect with themselves, each other, us, so that they can engage with external challenges such as AI, such as job insecurities, climate action, geopolitical conflict, economic disruption, and the list goes on. We need to be deliberate about what we do as educators, despite the deficit mindsets. We need to have clear intentions toward generating belonging, despite lack of time and overburdened curriculums. And we need to pay attention to our learners as people, despite learner and policymakers' resistance, and in some cases, outright hostility toward active, quality pedagogy. So, how might we build connections in our classrooms? How might we help with the inner and outer psychology of what's going on to build connection? Pay attention and intention toward building connection. Make it a deliberate thought in your curriculum design. We need to empower learners through what we do. We need to redesign our classrooms and our curriculums for co-creative, playful partnerships in learning and thriving for the futures. And we need to develop hope. I don't know about you, but I'm finding a really significant amount of students feeling hopeless. So how do we build hope in our classrooms? So here's some two things that I do. So now we're into the positive side of the presentation. So I want to share with you two models. One, the 3D briefing model, is one I have used and experimented with for decades. In fact, what made it so prominent for me, because what, so what, now what are the three questions that make up this 3D briefing model? And that's not a new model. What, so what, now what? It's a reflective tool. But it was when I was teaching in Israel in 2001 that it actually became more than just a reflective tool. And that's a whole other story. But since 2001, I've been constantly working with it, massaging it, asking students about it so that it becomes my go-to framework for everything. The other model I have here on the page, the inner development goals, is something I've just recently discovered, and I'm finding it really useful and helpful as well. So I'm going to go do a deeper dive into that. And I'm going to start with the inner development goals. And maybe some of you are familiar with this. I think most of us would be familiar with the UN Sustainable Development Goals, which lists, the 17 um, issues that we want to address in the world: poverty, gender equality, infrastructure, life on land, life underwater, healthy partnerships, etc. And the inner development goals was established around 2021. That's when it was kind of displayed to the world. And the concept behind it, behind the initiative, is that unless we take care of our inner being, unless we grow our inner compass, our empathy, our perspective taking, our openness, we're not going to meet the UN sustainability goal objectives. So we need to do this inner work before we can do any outer work. And the attributes you see in this chart, they fall under 5 categories: being, thinking, relating, collaborating, acting. And the attributes underneath were established by a survey that went out to over 3,000 researchers and scientists, and it asked 2 questions only. What do we need to fulfill the UN SDGs? And then the second question was, what else do we need? Very simple survey. Had I think the numbers were crazy. It was something like, because they did it again to get this new list. Originally there were 23 attributes, now there's 25. And it was something like 920,000 words. And then they aggregated that. And of course, it clustered down and they kept aggregating it till they got to this. So that's the inner development goals. Here's how I use it. So I've looked at how the conditions for belonging and connection can be enhanced through that IDG chart, and I've added that to my pedagogy. So one of the first things that I have, I guess, theorized that needs to happen is the role of teacher needs to become a constructivist role of facilitator. So I don't want to be the only authority in the room. I don't want to revert back to that banking style of education where I say everything that matters. Of course, this lecture is completely contradictory to that because I'm the only one talking, which is not how I run my classrooms. So I apologize for that. uh, so I think of it like collective theater. If you think of collective theater, there's always someone who takes the role of the outside eye, but it's not always the same person. And also, I think this idea of switching from being the teacher at the front of the room to a facilitator of meaning making is what's going to save teachers' mental health in this age of rapid technology. Because our students might know more about what's happening technologically, what's the newest, thing replacing Facebook or Instagram, or the newest tool, educational tool. They might know more than we do. So why not let them tell us in the class? And this is where we become the facilitator, the custodian, the archiver, almost a curator, museum curator could be another image of meaning making in the classroom. And once we adopt this position, it impacts my other actions. So I then will encourage and model presence and empathy. And for this means, for me, this means slowing down time, putting time in for developing the individual. And I do this in my classes through automatic writing, which is a 2-minute exercise at the beginning of every class, and then reflection through 3D briefing in the middle or at the end of class. And it might be 2 classes down the road where I debrief as well because we run out of time. But I do try and make time for presence and empathy and that inner work that shows up under the being category. I then practice co-creation, and I do this by asking questions, by adjusting and modifying what I'm going to be focusing on that day because I find through the question and answering, learners don't need that. They do have that skill. They need something else. They need another part of it. So rather than bore them, I find out through questioning where they're at and then adjust and modify. So another thing then is designing for multiple ways of expressing information and multiple ways of knowing as well. So inviting in indigenous knowledge, such as if we're going to talk about sustainability, and I teach communication, so I'm not teaching climate action, but I still bring in these issues when I can. I'll talk about the seventh generation concept in Indigenous learning, that we need to think 7 generations forward and we need to reflect 7 generations back. And that becomes our discussion of sustainability. And what do you think about that? And again, using the 3D briefing model, that so what is the significance of this to you means I'm valuing their experiences, their stories, their lives. And of course, this also invites playful risk-taking, where we celebrate our failures as a model of how the brain works and how innovation can come about. So as a framework, the 3D briefing model, I could do a talk just on this. And in fact, I have for different organizations. I have found over the 20 years I've been working with it, it works for everything. And because it is so simple, 3 simple questions. What did we do? So what was the significance? Now what will you do next time? We're talking about thinking, feeling, doing, and it fits any situation from an academic task to even a personal situation where I may be planning a retirement party or someone's birthday. What do I need to do? So, what will be the impact on the people gathered? Now, what actions do I need to take? It follows for almost every, well, I'm not going to even say almost, it does follow every communication method out there. It works for it. There's a beginning, middle, and end. It works for essays, for feedback, for strategic planning. Again, totally, I could do a talk just on that. It applies to all ages, grade levels, and abilities because it also appreciates and accepts experiences, all educational backgrounds, all personal stories. And then it encourages and practices constructive possibilities with that final question. Now, what will you do next time? This leads to action and hope because we are only in control of our own actions, but we can make small steps. And that now what asks us to think about that. We can do this from kindergarten. I'm a grandmother 6 times. I'm going to be 6 times, 5 only now, right now. But my oldest grandson is 6. And when he was around 2 years old, I was doing the what, so what, now what with him. And of course, he was only at the what level. Now he's at the so what level. And so it actually models the way the brain works. And we can use it before an event, during an event, and after an event. So since the 3D briefing model aligns to the way the brain works, it also aligns to Bloom's taxonomy. And now also I've aligned it to Vlad Glavinew's prompt framework, which is coming from possibility studies. And it aligns to so many other frameworks, but it makes it accessible for students because it's 3 simple questions. Most other models require you to be an expert questioner in order to do them. And so that, when you aren't an expert questioner, that feeds that deficit mindset. What, so what, now what? Unpacks that deficit mindset and tells students, you can do this. It's just 3 questions you need to work through, and they can get better as they practice it. So it goes across the individual domain. It develops self and other awareness. So that's the social domain. And culturally and environmentally, it encourages diversity with that so what question. So, what do you think the impact is? We're going to be different in those opinions. So, we're valuing diversity there. And then we're able to transfer it to environmental and global issues and things outside the classroom. So, it builds hopefulness because everything is an opportunity. But you don't have to take my word for it. You can look at some of these highlighted testimonials from students, and I have thousands of these because I'm always asking them to 3D brief. And the best is when we used to have exams in our communications class. We don't anymore. But I would see in the margins the students without prompting putting what, so what, now what in the margins to help them structure their answer for that high stakes exam. But you can see the highlighted words here: confident, capable. I feel confident, made my life so much easier, helped me resolve challenges more effectively, wish I'd had it sooner. So that's a 3D briefing. But now, what actions can we take to improve learners' sense of connection that goes with the IDGs? So I want to come back to that one. And here's where, I apologize for the really over busy slide. But ironically, I just realized the UN IDG initiative, their metaphor is the beehive, bees, busy bees working together to build this inner development chart. And I happen to use something that looks like beehives here. But what we need to do is, with attention and intention, we can align our positive instructor actions, that's in the yellow or orange beehive cluster or honeycomb cluster, with our arts-based activities. And I put arts-based in quotation marks because some of them are just creative and just unfamiliar to students. It's not that I'm having them paint or do things like that all the time. So I'm using arts in a very loose term, but they're creative activities. That's the purple. And then I'm aligning them now with the inner development goals from the UN initiative. And of course, 3D briefing. What did we do? So what's the significance? Now what will you carry forward in your actions? Makes the purpose, the objectives, the outcomes, the learning transparent and individualized. So I can differentiate my curriculum because I let the students differentiate it by giving the tools to do it. You know that quote about teaching someone to fish as opposed to just giving them fish? Teach them to fish, they eat for a lifetime. So if we look at this model a little closer, under the instructor, my attitude and actions will be to model reflection, to stress process over product, to build trust by stressing that the process is what's important, not always the final product. It's what you learned on the path, not, once you get to grandma's house. Promoting equity and diversity, every voice is valued. I rarely say no to anything in my classroom. I say, that's interesting. Let's think about that. So promoting that every voice should be heard, unless it's really, really harmful, hurtful, racist. That's a line in the sand. But I like to encourage hopeful possibilities. So let's not worry about if it's too expensive to do or if that solution is impossible because we don't have the technology. Let's articulate it anyways. And then accepting all different options and perspectives. And there's more things I can do, but I think you get the point that this is my attitude and my actions now. And then when we move into the activities, I do things like an accountability team, story circles, multimedia design projects, elevator pitches. So, like a sales pitch, but it's about yourself. They might do this in the form of music videos, scenario building, role playing, and that automatic writing, written and visual journals. which is a 2-minute activity at the beginning of class. And let me actually say, I am not dealing with art students. In fact, for the last few years, I've been dealing with skilled trades students. So these are the majority of them male, hardcore. They want to be plumbers, electricians, welders, working in industry. They are the farthest thing from an arts-based student as a whole. But yet, I can do this with them and they have fun, and my attendance rates are almost perfect. There's always one or two students that don't show up, but I might be missing 5 students, but those are students I haven't seen at all at the beginning. But I have students tell me they come to class because they never know what to expect. It's fun. It's not like their other communication classes that their friends are taking. So if I get them there because I'm weird and quirky, hey, that's half the battle. And now what I'm doing is I'm aligning all of these things that I've been doing before with the inner development goals. And here's a handy chart that I think is really useful. And I just did this for this presentation, but I'm going to use this now for all my classes because I put my activities on the side in green. And then under each UN category, I'm checking off whether that activity hits the inner being, whether it's about critical thinking, which is the pink category, whether it's collaborative, so the orange, and then relating to the world. And I have a very quick way of identifying and measuring what I'm doing in my classroom along the lines of this inner development work. So I can see that I'm doing pretty well with the being and the thinking and the relating, because they're always discussing, they're always, sharing their work. The relating, the caring for others in the world, I'm doing pretty well there. Where I could probably improve is in the acting, giving them assignments that enable them to think about change. And so how can they bring this into the world? So of course, my role-playing scenarios are all about interacting with the world, changing the way they engage with customers, etc. And what will they do differently, when they get into their careers and their fields. But maybe I can do something more with that, with the journal writing, by giving them a prompt that has them think about their careers. So I just want to kind of recap that there's a crisis among our learners, which is a crisis in connection and belonging. And how do we prepare our learners for uncertain futures and make them believe they have the capacity to make positive social change? So how do we go from the very sad figure in the top left, making them feel strong, secure, confident, so we get that figure in the bottom right? And I think one of the ways is to look at the future of education as an open, inviting door with fresh opportunities to nurture ourselves and our learners so that we're responsive to the needs of the planet, our societies, ourselves, and our families and others. And the first step, I think, is to provide them with accessible, reliable tools. And for me, the one tool has been 3D briefing. Now the other tool is the UN IDGs. And this talk, I think, identifies some of the issues and shares some of the things that I'm doing and experimenting with and exploring so that I can build community in my classroom. And we know the world is changing rapidly and education is changing too. And I'd like to ask you and close with you now, sharing, what do you do? What would you like to do? What are you doing now that can help build sense of belonging in your classrooms and help us expand that from the classroom to the world so that we all feel a sense of connection? And with that, I'm just going to close with this image of the UNIDG categories And maybe, if you feel comfortable sharing either verbally or in the chat, I want to end with your voice. I said, my classrooms are never with me just talking. But for the sake of time, sometimes it's easier because, of course, we could have been still at the deficit mindset if I opened up discussion. But I really would like to hear, what do you do to build connection and community? And I hope I have satisfied what you hope to get out of this talk. So I thank you very much. And I'm going to stop sharing and maybe we can have a brief uh, discussion on this.
Thank you so much, Christine, for your impressive research-based and the practical talk. And
You're
as you
welcome.
concluded that you would like to hear the audience what they have to suggest. And of course, for the people who joined the meeting late, I don't know if they were confused about the timing of the talk, but we ended with like 112 people
Mm,
out of 180 people registered.
that's great.
So, yes. And of course, if you allow that, we can forward the PDF file for this presentation to the audience who is registered for this talk. I will do this. And of course, we will have, or we open the platform for questions now. And the questioning will be, or the questioning or ideas you would like to share with us will take place as follows. First of all, we will have around 30 minutes for questioning because Christine has another commitment to do, and this is why.
Ask you or gonna ask her?
Yeah, if you please stop. If you have a question, please raise your hand, and we kindly ask you that you keep your question brief and focused on one point. We will start with the first hand we saw, and I will proceed with other people.
Okay.
So, okay, Sahar, you can start now. It is your turn. You can start.
Okay, first of all, Christine, thank you for this perfect session. Actually, you made me feel like I'm in my place,
Oh,
due
good.
to the fact that I feel like I'm giving a lot of effort to give my students to feel that they are in their place as well, that they feel
Mm.
that they are belonging and feel like that I can hear them all the time. Actually, I wanted to ask you something about I just wrote it here, just a minute.
30 seconds.
Sorry. I just wanted to ask you about the resilience. Is it possible that we can like grow it in our children before they get into schools and face these obstacles?
So when you say before they get into schools, are you talking about resilience in like very young children?
Yes,
Yes.
exactly. Like, can we like help them get to school with this resilience that they don't have to face these feelings, even though we know it exists in the schools? That's
Right,
cool.
right. Well, I think everything is possible to grow, right? So I think there's so much that we can do with our children before they reach school, as well as when they're in the school system. We can't just let school do everything as well. And we know some people feel that way. Once kids enter school, then the job to raise those kids come from the teachers. And, that's a lot of responsibility on us. But I think resilience is always something that we can develop with
Over
our
time.
children. Yeah, and I think Carol Dweck would say that as well, like the growth mindset. If you're familiar with her work, um, her theory would say, yes, of course, we can establish that in young children. And then we need to develop it as they face these obstacles. And some obstacles are going to be very challenging for kids. We know that from our own experiences. But do we have that inner capacity to know how to handle it ourselves? Do we have the inner capacity to know when we should ask help from others for it? Not always going alone, but let's reach out for support. I have a lot of students that for some reason reaching out for help is embarrassing, shameful. Somewhere along the way, they've been made to feel that way. And so when I know they need a learning accommodation and they don't want to go and get it, I try and tell them there's nothing shameful in asking for help. And and I'm going against who knows, years of what they've been told otherwise about that. I know with my own little grandson, the one, I work on resilience with him because if he can't do something, then right away, I'm never going to do this again. And it's like, okay, that's not true. You are going to do this again. But so I very deliberately try and tell him, don't have that mindset. Let's try it again. And see, I can't do it as well. Mainly this is in sports with him, but yes, I do think we can grow it. I think Carol Dweck and some other researchers out there also feel that. And they have, strategies. I would suggest look up Carol Dweck's work on growth mindset and see. But Sahar, tell me, what grade do you teach? Two? Oh, you're on mute. You're on mute still, Sahar.
Sorry, I've been interacting with you all the time. I didn't notice it's muted. Actually, I'm a high school teacher. Yeah,
Okay. Well,
adult.
congratulations.
It is.
That's a tough age group, but so important. I'm really glad to hear that, you try and build that community because there's so many issues facing teenagers,
It's harder when they are like older. That's
for
why I
sure.
was asking about like to do it like earlier in an early age.
Yes.
It's
Yes, I
more
agree.
like really relevant to make them
Right.
feel like it's okay to feel something bad now.
Okay,
And
okay.
this,
I have to move to the other question, please. Reem, please.
thank you.
Thanks, Sahar.
Hi, how are you, Christine?
Hi,
Please
Rim.
be
Nice.
brief. We don't have enough time.
As a music teacher in high school too, in your opinion, can music be like a tool to build belonging in school or emotional well-being? And if I want to develop a tool, a measurement to music creativity, so in your opinion, what is the most important first step you can tell me?
So your question is about whether music can be used to build
A
belonging?
tool to, yeah.
Okay. So I think all we need to do is look at how universal music is, right?
Mhm.
It connects people. We know that. We know it connects with the brain. We remember tunes easily. We associate music with different events in our lives. Yes, I definitely think music builds connection.
Mhm.
And you're at the high school level, Sahar's at the high school level. Many of you may be at the high school level. Very difficult age group, right? But
Yes.
music can be that thing that does connect us. I play music in my classrooms all the time. I had a very difficult class, very, very resistant. I couldn't even get them to move into groups quickly.
Hmm.
And what I did was I came into my classroom. Now, my classroom always changes. I don't have my own room. So
Yeah.
there's other classes, right, at the college level. But I would come in early because I knew no one was in that room before me. And I would get a visual up on the screen, a very provocative visual, something abstract. And I would play music. And it was music that they didn't recognize. It was coming from this company, Drama Sound, which is music they make for theater productions. So you don't have, recognizable lyrics. There's no lyrics to it. And I had students walking in, again, the unfamiliar, going, "What is this? Why are you doing that?" But it changed their attitude.
Yeah. Thank you.
If I played music at the beginning, I usually had a good class with them.
Nice to hear. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, definitely. So keep playing the music.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, Ghadir.
Hi, everybody. I am an education counselor, and our Dr. Fawaz Akil He always said that the student is not solving a math problem, but creating an artwork. Now I understand that with my with what, and I work with the as a therapist for CBT. And I can say, after all the negative experience, I see it as a good thing that we have returned to social skills such as SEL, and we teaching or we learning our stuff in the school to use that.
Mm. Hmm. Yeah, it's really important, the social emotional intelligence. And this is where, my point about the fact that we've devalued those skills for a long time and we were pushing hard skills, um, learn the specific skills you need for particular careers. And while you do need to learn that, really, with our fast changing world, some of those skills are going to disappear, and we don't know, what students are really going to need as far as hard skills. But the social emotional skills, they will always need. And that's what we found with COVID. People that had healthy social emotional identities, they were able to navigate that difficult time, which is why a lot of those employability lists have now moved those things: communication, collaboration, cooperating with others, conflict resolution. They've moved those up in their lists. Because if you have that, then I'm not saying that they will solve every problem. We know the world is facing some pretty terrible things that we can't control, but you at least are starting from a position of strength as opposed to a negative position.
And we make
Please,
our staff
we have another
belong.
person. Excuse me, Ghadir. We have another person. Anam, the last question, please.
Good evening, everybody. First of all, thank you
I
very
think we
much.
have one person more. Okay, go
I'm
ahead,
I'm
Uh,
good,
Anam.
Tazir, with questions. I have time if you do.
Okay.
I'm a principal school in Palestine for students aged from 11 to 15 years old. And we do some activities, living activities in our school, but we do them randomly, and we aim to share all students. The main aim is to share students who, in fact, don't share in their classes, because our classes are very crowded.
Hmm.
Um, but you encouraged me in this meeting to start thinking of doing something according to a plan in order to be more active and to achieve some good objectives at the end. So my question is, are there some courses that we can share with you, uh, but which can't be very comprehensive because we are overloaded with work, and also not very expensive?
So I'm not sure what your question is. Are there some courses you can take or some courses
Yes.
you
Yeah,
some
some
course
courses in this aspect that have, in fact, activities that we are engaged in, activities
Okay.
that we can apply with our students.
Okay. Well, definitely, maybe this is the time to plug the Mind the Gap book, Tazir. So this was a project where it was full of activities in a communications class that built empathy, collaboration, just practicing presentations, developing voice. And so this book is filled with activities that you can adjust and modify for any age level, because I firmly believe what I do at the college level, I could also do in elementary. I could do it in high school. I could do it with seniors. I just have to adjust and modify it. And we're all creative individuals. I mean, you're here through the International Center for Innovation and Education, so you are innovative. Um, and also, thank you for what you do as a principal and in these overcrowded very, overburdened classrooms. It's not an easy job. And the fact that you are thinking about how can you do it differently is a testament to your compassion and caring. And that's the
In,
first
in,
step.
yeah,
You
in
know,
some activities, we invite mothers and we let them share some activities with their students, which they like very much, and they asked for more activities like these.
yeah. I mean, one of the things I really love to do is share with other educators and talk with other educators about activities and how we can make them work and fit in the classroom. Maybe this is a course Tazir can offer through ICIE. But one of the things, just a very practical thing, is maybe doing the automatic writing because it really, so automatic writing is something very quick. I put on music, I give them a prompt. So I give them something to write about, and they have 2 minutes to write without stopping. And I tell them, don't worry about spelling, grammar, structure. You are just trying to capture all your thoughts. And that's the hard part, because if they find they don't know what to write about, well, they're going to write that on the page. I don't know what to write because that's what their brain is saying. And it really loosens them up. And then sometimes I will have them share, never read their work because it's not about the product. The product can be very messy. Um, but I have them share the concepts. And as I said, I'm dealing with a tough crowd. I'm dealing with, skilled trades men, and they do it and they actually enjoy it. So that might be something, just a very simple activity that you could ask all your learners, no matter age level, no matter cognitive level, to do. And then have them just share the bigger concepts. Like, what is your goal in life? Or what was your favorite? You come up with the prompt. I'm kind of at a loss for examples, but that might be something very simple and yet very impactful because it values their voice. And that is so important. For me, I'm trying to battle the idea that they have nothing to say. And I'm saying, sure you do. And unfortunately, I didn't say it in the presentation, but I've had a student this semester that came to me after class to tell me, he's a 20-year-old, but he wanted to tell me that his high school teachers told him he was stupid and school was not for him. So he went into the trades for 2 years after high school, but then realized he wasn't going to make as much money if he didn't have the college diploma. So he came back to school and he wanted me to know not to expect a lot from him. And
Mhm.
he wasn't challenging what his students or what his teachers said. He had internalized that, and that was going to explain to me why he was going to, behave certain ways. And he's been an amazing student in my class, but he doesn't think so. And so my job, I feel, is to make him see he has leadership capacity. It just doesn't look like what his high school teachers thought that meant. So I think you can do very little small things like automatic writing that builds confidence. And then there are other, of course, activities. And as I said, there's probably a whole other talk in that. But thank you for the question.
What is the title of
I,
your book? The title
excuse
of the
me,
book?
I have
The
two
title,
questions more.
yes.
I have two questions more. One in the chat room, which is saying, to what extent, this is from Yasser Abu Bakr, to what extent should the future of education shift from knowledge delivery to shaping resilience, value-driven, and AI adaptive human beings?
Yeah,
This
very
needs
good question.
another lecture, but you can,
Oh, for sure.
yeah.
And I think there definitely is that shift. But one of the things, and I don't think I said it during the talk, is we have to, rather than even thinking of a shift of this or that, it has to be a both and. It has to be that encapsulating that polarity. We can't have binary worlds anymore. That's why we had the hard skills and not the soft skills, because we were in that binary world. So, how can we integrate all of this? How can we still have knowledge delivery and help shape resilient, value-driven, and AI adaptive human beings. And that's definitely, our future. So I think it's an integration. And that's why I use the metaphor of the yarn. And I still remember doing that with my mother, probably like a week before she passed. And it was totally meaningless. None of us were going to be crocheting or knitting, but it was so meaningful that time together. So it's that and. I think if we go back to it's this or that, it's never going to happen. It's going to be a problem. So it has to be an integration of things, which is why, again, I think the UN chart can come into effect. I'm teaching customer service to these trades students, but I can still align it with the UN Inner Development Goal that the activity I'm having them do is having them think about their own values as a person in the workforce. It's having them discuss it with another one. So now we're relating and we're critical thinking. And when they come up with an answer that's maybe not that ethical, I could then say, well, let's think about this differently. Who is that going? You've now just oppressed your client by upselling them, or so I can actually go across the UN IDGs, even though I am teaching them a sales knowledge, a sales point. But I can build that in. So I think it's an idea of adaptation. I do have in the slide is we'll be sharing the slides, Tazir, with people.
Yes, you can.
Okay. So there is a slide that I had that I didn't share because it was about AI, but our college, a colleague of mine, has developed a chart about AI use in the classroom. And it goes all the way from them using it, no, not using it at all in your assignments, to using it as a consultant. So that might be something useful to share. And he's telling us to use this chart in our assessments so that students know, is AI prohibited, or is it only for copy editing, or is it a consultant, brainstorming? So anyways, whole other topic as well, right, Tizir? The whole issue.
Yes.
Yes. So we have other questions.
Yeah. Okay, Fida, please.
Hi, I would like to ask you to thank you for this essential information. My question is, since we come from indigenous minority and we teach using curriculum that creates disconnection to our culture and alienation to our culture, and our students, they live in a complex society that suffers struggles, poverty, and also violence. How can we create and develop this feeling of belonging to our community while our students feel ashamed of this phenomena that they live and with this complex reality that we have?
Yeah, thank you for your question. Very trying times everywhere. And I think this is why I've gravitated towards the UN IDGs, the Inner Development Goals, because there are people that worked on that document that are working in very, adverse conditions. And they're using this framework to try and build that inner development and that resilience. And, let's face it, I come from a privileged part of the world, and so I in no way have and am facing the struggles that you're facing and that your students are facing. And so a lot of this has to be adjusted to those situations. I do think something like the 3D briefing model, what is happening? So, what is the significance of this to me as an individual, as well as to my community, opens up that dialogue of differences and perspective taking that is so important for the next step, which is now what are the actions we can do? Because a lot of our issues are coming from the issue of different perspectives. People are seeing things differently, and they're not realizing that these perspectives are not an either or, it's an and again. So I think, the 3D briefing is something just to get people even talking and discussing. And then as I said, I may not be the most qualified person to advise. I would really appreciate working with a group of people on this, because it is a complex issue, and I don't want to speak from a position of priority that I know the answers, because I don't. And that was one thing that I learned in teaching in the Middle East, that I would come in and I'd observe and I would learn from you, because I have no right to come in and say, what I would do. I don't live in your situation, but I do think what benefited me at that time and my students, who were teachers, so they were not children, they were educators, was that we had the dialogue and we learned from each other. So I think that idea of co-creation is really important too. What does the group need, and what does the individual need, and how can that again integrate together? I don't know if that answers your very complex question, but
Thank
I
you.
have a question in the chat room. It is Fatina Hijli. I am the principal of an elementary school where we have 51 deaf students learning over there. 5 years ago, I decided to teach them empathy for all the students, of course, through a STEM unit, which the deaf students participate. How can we measure its impact?
oh, well, it's 5 years ago. So you'd have to
Yes.
find them. That's very interesting, that you were teaching STEM and you build empathy into it. That's a great example of that idea of integrating, the transferable skills with the hard skills, science, technology, engineering, and math. And how can you measure it? So, I mean, one of the things that I do when I'm doing a formal research project is I do a pre and a post survey. That's how I got those word clouds. So students did something using Mentimeter or Padlet, or it was just a straight, linguistic, like word-based survey, and they told me their perceptions of how empathetic they were, how good of a communicator they were, how well of a collaborator they were. And that's where I got the first word cloud, that they didn't feel very strong at all. And then you want to bookend that at the end with that post survey. And of course, I'm very much a qualitative researcher. I think Tazir has many more friends that are quantitative researchers and would do the hardcore surveys. But I usually ask about student perceptions of themselves and students' perceptions of the situation. So to measure the impact, it might even be just you asking whether they perceived a change and coming up with the appropriate questions for that survey. When I'm just teaching any class, I use 3D briefing. What did you learn? So what was the significance? Now what future actions are you going to take forward? And I will do that at the end of a course, and I'll leave it wide open for them to tell me whether that empathy unit was something that they're going to carry forward. And it might not be. It might be something else I didn't even expect. But I do use the 3D briefing as a reflective tool at the end of a course. And that can be a very simple measure. If they're 5 years ago, it would be interesting to do a longitudinal study, but you would have had to have known that 5 years ago to follow them and get the proper consents. But
Not
3D
4,
briefing,
5.
yeah.
Not the same students learn 4, 5. In the third grade, all of the school students learn this STEM unit.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah. So what I do is I give out a reflective like template. What topics did you learn the most from? So they're just identifying the empathy topic, the communication topic, the topic about public
And in your
speaking.
lives, in your lives, what changed in your lives now?
And then the so what question, ask them, so what's the significance of this? Why did you pick this topic as the one that that you really liked. So then they give you that significance, which is about how it changed their lives, no doubt. And then the now what makes them think how they're going to carry it forward, which I think is really important. So the learning doesn't end with the classroom. When the classroom ends, that now what question asks them, now what are you going to do in the future with this information that was significant? And that's what asks them to deliberately think about transferring that knowledge into the real world. Because quite often they could say, yeah, I love that empathy unit, but they don't know what to do with it because now they're out of grade 5, they're into grade 6, and they're learning new things. That now what question asks them to pay attention to what they found significant and carry it forward, which could be a very small thing. I'm going to say hello to people on the street, or I'm going to explore. We had the one woman talking about indigenous coming from a minority. I'm going to explore the minorities in my community through research, through, asking questions. That's a much bigger action step. So they could start small, or they could do
We
something
use
like,
ULG,
Please,
Kristen.
please, please. We have another
Okay.
question.
Okay.
Please, please.
serious
I
question.
asked you at the very beginning. Please, you should be brief. No multiple questions at the same
Not
time.
multiple. It's okay.
Yeah, it's
Thank you.
okay.
Anyone
Uh,
can reach out to me as well, Tazir, through
yes,
email.
sure,
I'm more than
sure.
happy to
Because
connect.
we have a large number of audience, so I would like to give an opportunity for everybody
Thank you.
to ask. So
I'll keep my
yes,
answers brief. That's the problem. It's not the
oh,
questions.
it's
It's
okay.
me.
Answers are not required to be brief, but questions should be brief. Okay. So Sahar and then Reem, and we will conclude. 30
Okay.
seconds.
Okay, so we have focused a lot on student sense of belonging, and I wanted to ask you if there's what about teachers? I mean, how can we support their sense of belonging as well? If I can't feel belong in my school or where I belong or where I work, so how can I give this to my students?
For sure. Very good question, Sahar. They've all been really wonderful questions. And yes, student-centered. Now let's switch to the teacher. So there was something I said in the presentation at one point where it's not just about the students' inner belonging. It has to be us as well. Because if we don't understand what our inner compass is, if we don't have empathy, if we don't appreciate co-creation, that students have voice, and we might be showing our age by making a certain statement about technology, and
True.
they know there's other things, then how can we have that belonging? So it's us working at ourselves as well. And I think it's about us being opened to what is out there. So attending forums like this, finding those groups out there, because they may not be in your school. There's very few people that I connect with in my school because we're so siloed. There's the business department, the engineering department. I'm a service department. Now I'm in a campus where I don't even go to main campus. So how can I build community? But I do have those 2 or 3 people that if I have to run an idea by, if I'm struggling, I can reach out to them, even though we probably have thousands of people working at the college. But I don't need thousands. I need those people that will listen and that get me. And I have
So here you're
found,
talking about the inner development goals that you talked about in the lecture,
yes,
like
yes,
thinking,
think
relating, collaborating, and all. I think
right.
it's acting as well.
Yes, exactly. And
As a
and
teacher,
so
not as a student.
as the teacher, I think in both, the
Yeah.
teacher, and this, I had talked about modeling for the students. So if I model for the students that I'm struggling with the acting part, I want to be more active in my community. If I show them that I have that struggle, they see I'm human.
True.
I just did this with my students last week in regards to AI. I just did a very unofficial poll, and I sent out a piece of paper with that chart I was talking about those students that do a cut and paste in AI, which is a form of academic dishonesty. and those students that are using it for proofreading and style enhancement. And I told them this has nothing to do with your grades. I'm struggling with how I'm to respond with AI and the assignments I create. And so I told them that I want their input. I want to know how many of you are using it in a cut and paste form. And I just handed out the sheet. I said, don't put your name on it, but put a check mark on how you've used AI. And they did it. And then it came back to me, and I thanked them because I said, this has nothing to do with you right now and your grades. It has to do with the future and what assignments, but back to the inner development, I think, Sahar, it's about finding your group. And what Tazir has created with ICIE is one of those groups because it may not be in your institution. If your institution looks at education in a particular way, you might just want to close the door and do your own thing and not share, to get in trouble. So you find it elsewhere. You find those people elsewhere, and they will carry you forward. You'll get energy from them that you can then transfer into your classroom. So I don't know if that answered your question, but I think it is about you developing along with your students.
Thank you, Christine. I have the last question from Reem. You please start.
Hi, Christine. First of all, thank you. My question is about the students who are talented, who are motivated and responsible learners. Of course, they face a lot of pressure from school and from their parents and even from themselves to keep performing well. And this pressure, of course, can lead to stress and can lead to emotional exhaustion. My question is, how can we teachers support these high achieving students who are under pressure and keep them and help them to stay engaged and emotionally resilient?
Yeah, another great question. Everyone's questions have been so wonderful. Yeah, you definitely have identified, the students that are engaged and motivated, but can almost push that to being a negative because of that sense of having to be high achievers. So one of the things that I have done when I face those students is I try and really emphasize the process over the product. And we do a lot of creativity activities, which is really just about brainstorming and not creating that perfect product. And I think that helps them to see that it's okay to fail, and you fail fast, as Clayton Christensen said with creativity and innovation. Fail early. If you have to fail, you want to fail early in the process. But what you're really up against, Rima, is a social culture that's been developed, through the family, and that can sometimes be really difficult for us to counter, because we're telling them one thing, but then they get home and their parents are maybe only looking at the grades. So again, there may be better people, counselors, even in this group, that could answer that question better. But one of the things I try and do with my class as a whole is emphasize the process over the product. And for those students that are high achievers, I try and bring them in to help me. So I show them that they're needed in a different way than their assignment, but maybe I'll bounce that idea about AI off them in an informal conversation, before the class starts. And so I'm modeling the fact that I'm struggling with the challenge. I don't have the answer to it, and this is part of life as well. I think it's definitely a challenge with the students that have the pressure from home too.
Especially from bushy parents.
Mm.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you so much, Christine. I think I would like to announce Now we also have like a lecture which bridge very well with Christine's talk. It will be by Ken Reimer from Canada, from Winnipeg University. And he is going to talk how could we connect and nurture the gifted and talented students. You see, it fits very well with
Yes.
what we have today for this lecture. And it will be on Wednesday at 4 p.m. Jerusalem time. Of course, the lecture will be in English, and through Zoom, we could have like simultaneous translation. So you are all invited. I will send you also the invitation to attend the next lecture on Wednesday. And in conclusion, I would like to thank you, Christine, for this impressive talk. Really, you enlightened us, and you are encouraging all people, all educators in this meeting, how to improve and how to make education transformative, and also to be or to prepare students for better future. Thank you so much, and
Thank you,
we
Tizir.
hope to see you again in the near future.
For sure. Thank you so much, Tizir, for the opportunity. Thank you, everyone, for coming, your wonderful questions. I know I didn't get to them all, but you are all wonderful educators, obviously, because you're here and you're associated with this group. So I wish you all the best. And I put my email in the chat if anyone wants to reach out. And yes, I do hope maybe to see some of you.
You will. Thank you so much.
All right.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you. Now I would like to inform people who would like to stay, like all my students, all my PhD students, they can stay in the room because we will have a second part of this event in order to discuss in details what, Christine introduced today as part of their education. And for other participants, we highly appreciate that you joined us today, and we are looking forward you join us on Wednesday at 4 p.m. Jerusalem time. And I will send you the link again. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye, Tazir. Take care.
Bye-bye. Thank you.